Solving inequalities is exactly like solving equations with two exceptions. The first one is that if you multiply or divide both sides of your inequality by a negative, you must flip the inequality symbol. And so you'll notice this when you're working on your reciprocal step, because we're not really dividing. We are multiplying by the reciprocal. So when you get to a step like this, where you have, say, negative 4x is greater than 24, we're going to multiply both sides by negative 1/4 to get the x by itself. So what we have to do at this point is flip our inequality. So it's going to change from greater than to less than, and we end up with x is less than negative 6. The reason this happens is because of working with multiplication of negatives. Keep in mind that whenever you have a negative times a negative, you get a positive, which is always a greater value than either of the negatives. Or if you get a negative times a positive, you end up with a negative, which is going to be smaller than the positive value. So it's because we are multiplying with negatives that we have to flip the inequality. Now the other thing that's different is graphing. Remember that x being less than 6 gives us an infinite number of solutions, so we want to have a way to show that. And on our number line, we're going to graph it with the techniques we just learned. So to make it easy for you to draw your number line, you can just put the number that is the solution and its opposite on opposite sides of the 0, and then go ahead and graph. In other words, you don't need to put the tick marks of 1 through 5 here, because that'll just take us too long. We'll spend too much time graphing. You do need to know, however, how to graph, how to create a number line, but I will not require you to do this on all your problems. So now when we look at the graph of this inequality, we need to determine whether we have an open or closed circle. Which do we have? We have an open circle, right? Because it's less than, there's no equals to involved, so it does not equal negative 6. And then which way does our arrow point? Points in the less than direction, right? And this is the basic way that we solve inequalities. I would like for you to solve and graph this inequality. So you solve this inequality exactly like you solve an equation. In this case, we did not multiply both sides by a negative, therefore we do not flip the inequality. And the step where I determine this is my reciprocal step, where I multiply by the reciprocal. So since 1/2, which is what we're multiplying by on both sides, is a positive number, we do not flip the inequality. And then we end up with x is less than or equal to 1. Since we have less than or equal to, we are going to have a closed circle, and we're going to point the arrow in the negative direction or smaller direction, since the answers are equal to 1 or less than 1. Try this inequality. Be sure to change all division to multiplication and subtraction to addition. When solving this equation, again, make sure that you've changed your subtraction to addition and multiplication to division. Add 4 to both sides, then multiply by negative 3. So notice that when you multiplied both sides, your reciprocal was negative. Therefore, you have to flip the inequality from greater than to less than. You end up with x is less than negative 6. So that's an open circle on negative 6, since there's no equal to involved. And all the solutions are less than negative 6, so the arrow goes in the less than direction.